Thank you. Welcome everybody to the December Safe Routes to School Network call. Excited to have you all here. My name is Alyssa Schuffman. I use she and they pronouns. I help facilitate the network calls every month. I really do look forward to them. We'll start just by talking a little bit about what is the Safe Routes to School Network to get us all grounded. So it is hundreds of professionals from organizations and agencies working across Minnesota to advance safe routes to school. We build skills together in Minnesota communities to implement our safe routes to school, engagement, infrastructure projects, education, all the good things, so that we can make Minnesota a state where all children, no matter their background, can walk and bike and roll to school. I am excited today. We have Dave doing our, as always, stellar MnDOT update, first up on the agenda. And then we have Joanne Moze from the Center for Prevention at Blue Cross Blue Shield joining us to digest the annual survey results from the survey that went out a number of weeks ago that many of you responded to. So very excited to be able to center your feedback and thoughts in today's conversation. So with that, I will turn it over to Dave to give the MnDOT update.
I just realized that the participant sharing is turned off. So if you or Julie could turn that on for me.
On it.
Let me know when I'm good to go.
Wouldn't be a Zoom call without some tech issue. We'll see if we can add some more later in the call. We're doing polls today.
The world is our
looks
oyster.
like Alyssa, you might have to because I'm a co-host and you're a host.
Great. All right, give it a try now, Dave.
All right. Let's see how we're doing here. I'm presuming you can see my screen, and then I'm just adding all your faces back to my other monitor here so I can see people. Welcome, folks. I'm Dave Cowan. If we haven't met before, I'm the Safe Routes to School Coordinator at the Minnesota Department of Transportation. Definitely seeing some new names on the call today, so that's always fun. And I thought I would lead with a little update on what's been going on at MnDOT, a little view into our not so black box. And first off is with a little bit of a celebration for those of you that were participating in walk and bike to school day back in October. We hope to have had made this decision by our November call, but we hadn't. And we had our annual photo contest along with walk to school day, and our winner is from Riverside Elementary in Rochester. They had a semi-rainy day that turned into a not so rainy day and captured this photo of this young person riding their bike and just, I don't know, that smile, it just gets me. So congratulations to Riverside Elementary. They're fantastic, and thanks to all of you that submitted photos. There's plenty of them over on the Minnesota Safe Routes to School Facebook page if you care to scroll through and see what people were doing on Walk to School Day. I'm sure many of you have been paying attention that MnDOT has had a number of grant solicitations open this fall, so I thought I would give you a quick rundown on what's going on with our boost solicitation, planning assistance, TA, and well, it isn't Safe Routes to School, our active transportation program infrastructure solicitation, because I suspect while you're here working on safe routes, you also probably dabble in active transportation. So first off, as many of you know, our Boost implementation grant window closed last night actually. We received 11 applications, which is low, but I think consistent with maybe the bandwidth we've seen in schools to do things like fill out applications. We have about $250,000 available for our Boost implementation grants and roughly $332,000 in requests. So we'll be seeing what comes of those in the next month or so as our review team reviews the applications. I'll pause for questions at the end of this, by the way, if anybody wants to log a question. For those of you in greater Minnesota, you know that our TA solicitation for infrastructure has been open. That's a federal infrastructure program that Safe Routes to School is one of the eligible programs of. Just looking at all of the letters of intent that came in October for that program throughout the state, there were 51 letters of intent that were submitted, and 17 of those 51 were Safe Routes to School projects, which I think says a lot for how that program draws in a lot of folks interested in Safe Routes to School. And roughly $7 million of the total requests were Safe Routes to School as well. If you're interested in like the breakdown, it's really small at the bottom of the screen here, but I can try and drop the link when I'm done talking of, you know, just exactly how much money goes out to each one of the ATPs in greater Minnesota to distribute. It isn't a large sum of money when you're thinking about the kind of size of the region and how much these types of projects can cost, but it is in the millions. So. And perhaps most impressive of all was our AT program infrastructure solicitation. For those of you that have been following MnDOT for years, the active transportation program is relatively new. You know, it was formed several years ago. The legislature provided funding for it just in the past year and a half or so. And so we had our first active transportation program solicitation for infrastructure this fall. We received 91 letters of intent for what is $3.5 million in total grant funds. Those 91 letters of intent equal over $30 million in requests for active transportation. So on one hand, that's a lot of applications for a not large amount of money. On the other hand, I think this really demonstrates the interest and demand that we have across the state for active transportation improvements in our community. So I'm really excited about what this tells us as MnDOT, but also tells the legislature as people that kind of make decisions about how much of this funding we're able to distribute each year. And then it's worth making a nod here for our planning assistance solicitation. If you're new to Safe Routes to School planning assistance pays for a professional planner to come into your community, help you pull together a team of professionals from various disciplines and work together to identify barriers and come up with solutions that can be executed over a 5-year timeline or so. And put that all on paper so that you all can start working away at your punch lists. We have as much as $400,000 available in planning assistance. Those applications are due early in January on the 11th. If it's anything like the boost grants, we'll get them all on January 11th. We already did some informational webinars on that, but if you have questions about planning assistance for your community, you can always feel free to reach out to me and I'll give you a one-on-one spiel about it. And since we don't have a January call, I thought it was worth putting out a teaser for Winter Walk to School Day registration and remind folks that similar to the photo contest, we have a Golden Snow Boot Award in February. Winter Walk to School Day falls on February 1st. So for those of us working in schools, you might leave for Christmas break and then suddenly be like, oh, crud, it's time to get things together for Winter Walk to School Day. So the registration on our website is open. We will send out supporting materials like we do for the other events. And within the next couple of weeks, we should have kind of template materials that you can use for posters and social media, communications tools related to Winter Walk to School Day. And my apologies that I haven't been able to put these links in the chat. I'll follow up with that as we get started with the next presentation. And then any questions on the MnDOT update, on the solicitations, events? All right, all right, all right. In which case, I'll pass it over to you, Alyssa.
Thanks, Dave. I'm always amazed at how many things you managed to cram into that update, and also so digestible. It takes a lot of skill.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think before we jump into survey results, I wanted to just kind of check in with the group. It's our last call of the year. It's been a big year. It's been a big several years. And would love to just hear from folks any highlights or reflections that you have from your work this year. You can come off mute, you can put some notes in the chat. But just thinking about, we've all collectively done a lot of work this year. And I know that there are things that you are excited about, or great memories that you have, or things that you're really proud that you or other folks in your community have done or started to do. So just wanted to take a minute and give that some space. And I will give it some space. If we don't hear from folks in the chat, I'll just be very quiet over here for a long time. I am not above using the awkward silence to get folks to participate. It's a lesson I learned from Jill.
I can give a little update.
Go for it.
This is Josh in Rice County. And we did 3 demonstration projects this year, which are in 3 different cities around Rice County, which is pretty cool. And we're working on another one for next year in a different city. And really cool, we got a public health AmeriCorps, and one of her main goals over the next year up until July 15th is to work with schools and try to implement walk and bike to school routes on a daily basis. And try to be that person that students can follow, that adult that schools don't always have and parents can't always be there to implement at least one school, if not other schools, each day of the week. And she has her first meeting tonight with the school at a PTA, PTO to try to work on implementing those routes on a daily basis.
That's super cool. And it's one of those things where I can only imagine the amount of steps and work that went into getting to this moment to be able to bring this person in and set them up for success and connect them to all those different schools. So that's an awesome reflection and highlight from the year. I see a couple notes in the chat. Joanne, first remote drop-off event on Walk to School Day. Previously, the district felt it was a liability. So excited to hear that folks are maybe changing their mindsets about what is possible with the work and priorities. What else is going on? Luke is noting really focused this year on, the chat keeps moving around on me, infrastructure planning and implementation, stuff beyond safe routes to school. Although, I think that lots of infrastructure planning and implementation that we do has impacts on kids. So that's all really exciting. Melissa in Brown County. Oh yeah, the chat's popping off now. I can't go fast enough.
I can jump in and do every other one with you if that's helpful.
That would be great, Dave. Thanks.
All right. But you were starting with Brown County.
I was. So excitement for Bree to take over the Safe Routes to School coordinator position in New Ulm. Hi, Bree. Welcome. Exciting projects coming up, active transportation planning grant, boost grants, etc. So
Looks like Sarah in St. Paul is doing some work with their special ed transition program, bike education, free bikes for students, walk audits. Ooh, I like the walk audits angle, Sarah. That's great.
Note from Tina that a city completed Parks and Trails master plan, which included safe routes to school. Let's include safe routes to school and everything. From that plan, they inquired about funding, which is exciting. I think there's also a question here about the best funding source for that outside of SHIP funding, or if it's an allowable SHIP expense. And as not the SHIP person on the call, not the MDH person on the call, but I will pin that question. Dave, do you have an answer, or are you jumping for the next one?
I'm happy to punt that to Ellen as well. She'd know, but I don't think she's on the call today.
Okay, we'll pin it and make sure that Ellen gets connected.
I'm here.
Oh,
Yep.
hi, Ellen.
Here. Yeah, we can for RFP. That's something where if you want to submit a request, and we'll review it. We have funded those in the past.
I was wondering if there's other funding sources besides SHIP before SHIP funded it.
Oh, that I do not know off the top of my head.
We don't know yet, Tina, what's in store for next fall in terms of infrastructure funding for safe routes, but I suspect we'll know in the coming months. That could be a potential funding source. They just keep coming in here. Alyssa, are we gonna be able to keep up with all this? Will got his walk bike fun training in Richfield. Woo!
No, from Patrick that we ribbon cutting for a new multi-use path next to high school. That is oh, look at that. So good. Thank you for sharing a photo with us.
I want to know how Patrick was able to share, but I was on lockdown. That's what I want to know.
Everybody can share now.
Oh,
Well, let's do a couple more. Maybe one more for you, Dave, one more for me, and then we can close it out.
yeah. I'm actually going to jump all the way down to Michelle, who was talking about having their first walk to school day event since COVID started at the middle school and the high school. One, I love seeing walk to school day events with older students. And two, it is just a sign that things are coming back. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Cool. Carol got active transportation, those acronyms, still learning them all the time. Planning grant for a road corridor that includes an elementary school, and the school has agreed to apply for a safe routes planning grant so that the project will be more well-rounded in planning and implementation. And then also recruiting schools to apply for safe routes to inform other road reconstruction projects a few years down the road. So that is bringing all the pieces together, all the stakeholders, all the conversations to make big things happen. So cool. Well, if folks have any other highlights, feel free to put them in the chat. I'm really enjoying seeing them and reading them and getting to share them out. But I think it's, like I said, we've done a lot of work as a collective this year. And I think reflecting on that before we go into the survey results for me is really helpful because, right, like we're not doing surveys just because we love surveys. We're doing surveys because it helps inform the work. It helps make these calls more useful to you all to be able to do the amazing things that you're all doing every day. So thank you all for
Speaking of those amazing things, I know that I've talked to people on this call. I see your names and they're not showing up in the chat. And you've told me about amazing things that you've done this year or things that have happened with your program. So as we go on, please keep dropping those in there. They're, I think they're inspiring.
Cool. All right. I'm going to share screen again. I can share screen too. So I will give just a minute or two of context here, and then I'm excited to turn it over to Joanne. So as we think about, why we do an annual survey every year, why we have this time to report back survey results to the network, right? Just want to be clear that the planning team really does use these results as a guide in our work. Every year there are certain lessons that we've learned in prior years where it's important for us to have those reconfirmed, right? Understanding who is able to come to the calls, whether or not the time of day and things like that are working for folks. Understanding the different backgrounds of folks who join us on the call, their different geographies and experience. It's also really helpful for us to gather information about potential topics. So as we think about both reflecting back, but also, planning forward, that we want to be understanding what we're doing well, and we want to understand opportunities for improvement and figure out, what is important to you all on these calls to be talking about, because these calls are really, they're your calls. We just facilitate them. And then note that this presentation really does help us proof our understanding of what is shared with us in those survey results. So wanting to make sure that as we go through and kind of share out our results or see areas where we think there's something like juicy here that we want to dig into a little bit more, that we have you all in the room to help us make sure that we're interpreting those things correctly or to provide that additional nuance. So with that, I'm going to keep sharing my screen, and then I am going to turn it over to Joanne.
Hey everyone, my name is Joanne Moze, and I see a lot of familiar faces and a lot of new faces on the call as well. I work at the Center for Prevention at Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Minnesota. I work with Jill and am an evaluator at the center, and have participated in these calls for many, many years, although less so in the last year as some of our goals have shifted away from active living. But I'm happy to be on the call again and sharing these survey results with you all. So first of all, just going to do a quick overview of who responded. And of course, thank you all for responding. This is what makes the survey work, and again, keeps the network on point with what you all need and what's useful for you all. So there were 38 respondents this year. This is a really good response rate. Last year there were 32. The year before there were 26. Just for context, I did a real quick average for the last 5 years, and it was 34 responses. So a great response rate for this year. The majority of folks who participated are public health professionals or planners, and also the majority are representative of government agencies. And both of these percents are pretty similar to what we've seen in previous years. Over half of folks joined the network more than 4 years ago, and around 10% in the last year. Only 13% of the respondents have not attended any calls in the last years. So mostly we're getting responses from people who have attended the calls. And this is important to keep in mind as we look at survey results and compare from year to year. Also, as of December 22, there were 198 members of the network. So this gives us a response rate of 19%, which again is higher than last year, even though there were more respondents in other years. That this just generated a higher response rate. Okay, so for just some more information on the respondents, here we have two mini little pie charts. One's from 2022 and one's from 2021. And I just got to correct here. I think in the last slide, I said we had 32 respondents last year, but it's actually 49. And one of the differences you can see here is that when we look at the geographic representation, there's a larger percent from the metro area and a smaller percent from the rural when we compare it to last year. And again, this is good to keep in mind when we compare the results across years and think about what this might mean in relation to some of the differences. Okay, so this is a question about, we do this question every single year, and these are different aspects of the calls and how satisfied people are with different aspects of them. So as you look at this in general, you can see people were somewhat satisfied or very satisfied overall. And similar to almost every other year, the one that came in at the highest is the highest level of satisfaction was with the MnDOT updates. There was also a comment similar to this that was in support of it, that the quote is, "Dave is great and the mix of participants' roles is interesting and informative." The lowest, and again, this is really high satisfaction across the board. But when we look at where the lowest levels of satisfaction are, it's the scheduled day of week and scheduled time of day. But again, this is people who attended the calls that are responding to this question. So now we're going to just look at the level of satisfaction from the results from this year compared to last year. And just want to note quick that we changed the response options a little bit this year and took out the neutral option. So on the 2021 chart, the neutral option is the orangish color. So that was not an option this year. And it just, it ensures that people pick either, one level of satisfied or one level of unsatisfied. The other thing that was changed a little bit is satisfied. We had the option of satisfied last year, and then that was somewhat satisfied this year. And then that's similarly true on the unsatisfied options. So what's really noticeable here is that you can see that there's very high levels of folks who said that they were very satisfied. And this pretty much goes across all the different aspects of the calls. Okay, so the next slide. So this was suggestions for improving the calls. And far and away, the number one thing that came up in response to that question was great job. So comments like good mix of people and resources, glad they're recorded. I think MoveMin has been doing a great job. I actually feel they have been coming to life more recently. I think there have been some full agendas lately, which is only a bummer when something doesn't get covered. So one of the other things that was a theme that came out in response to this question was more from other communities, and in particular, more from non-metro Twin Cities areas. And again, I think this is something that we hear semi-frequently. There were mixed preferences with the breakouts. Some like them and find they provide good opportunities for network, and others really just prefer staying in the large groups. One thing that's different than previous years is we often hear something about the scheduled time of day and day of week, and that didn't show up in the comments this year. Okay, so what resources and topics from last year of the calls have you used in your Safe Routes to School work? And this is a new question for this year. And as you can see, Boost Grants, Inspiration and Ideas was the thing that was most used. Lots of other topics here that came up. Well over 50% of people that are using the topics in their work. And then, you know, some of the ones that really weren't used, busing crisis, school siting, came in, you know, under 10%. Topic interest areas for 2023. So this was in response to please indicate your interest in the following topics and resources to help us plan future Safe Routes to School calls. And there were 4 different response options for this. They were, I'm very familiar with this topic and have integrated it into my work. And then I'm working or would like to work on this and more resources would be helpful. I'm curious about this. And then the last option was I don't need information or resources on this topic. So what we did was take the responses to I'm curious about or I want more support and tally those up. And the top 2 areas of interest were program sustainability and equitable engagement. And they rose to the top by quite a bit. And then these other 5 that come in below, the evaluation tools, youth engagement and leadership, integrating Safe Routes to School, funding and local policy, climate action, and Safe Routes to School. Those collectively came in at, you know, kind of a second place, so to speak. But all of these, 80% of more of folks selected one of these 2 categories.
All right, Julie and I are gonna hopefully launch a poll. I'm gonna look at Julie to do the technical stuff. But you know, in terms of the program sustainability, as we were reflecting on this question and the responses we got from you all about, yes, we are really interested in a conversation about program sustainability. Part of what we realized is we needed to understand, what does sustainability mean to you? Does it mean financial sustainability? Does it mean that you all you know, are worried about staff burnout? Does it mean that you feel like you don't have the year-over-year support that you need in different ways? So sustainability can mean a lot of different things. It could mean climate sustainability as we think about climate breakdown and impacts of that. So we're hoping that you all can just take a minute here and reflect to us, what does sustainability mean to you as we are, you know, thinking about this as an interest area for planning for future calls.
I'll give a 10-second warning when I close it, but I'll give you guys a little bit here to think about it.
Yeah, and certainly it can mean like multiples of those things, right? You know, I think we're really excited to hear what you all have to say. or maybe it means none of the things I said. Maybe you have a different definition of what sustainability means to you, and I want to know what that is too.
Give a little bit longer here. Results are trickling in. This is great. Or answers are, at least.
Yeah, and just keep ticking up.
Yeah.
So. All right, Julie, why don't we give it another 15 or so seconds? We've got close to half the folks on the call responding. So, you know, and even if you're not sure, right, like it would be helpful to know if you're like, I'm not sure what sustainability means and how that's important to me. I haven't reflected on that in the past. There are no wrong answers.
I'll close it in about 10 seconds. All right.
All right, Julie, are you able to share the results to the group? I don't know exactly what folks are seeing. Are folks seeing that 20 responded with no details?
Yes.
Okay, that's helpful. We will
Here we go.
troubleshoot some of
Whoopsie.
that on the back end because I do want to share out the results with the group. So maybe Julie or I could log into the back end while Joanne continues the presentation, and we'll put some notes in the chat about what you all shared.
Great, thank you. All right, so the next slide is the information in response to the question, what are the top 3 priorities for safe routes to school work in your community? And I took a look at these and created themes about what we were hearing in response to that question. And they're really similar to last year. And the number 1 response was really around engagement and engagement of all, students, parents, and schools. So kind of all different aspects of the folks that you work with in safe routes to school. The other top priorities were equity, education, infrastructure, and safety. And Alyssa asked me if I intentionally themed these by the 5 E's, and I didn't do that, but they came through in the response options that way. So when we were thinking about safety, some of the responses around that were increasing bicycle and pedestrian safety, helmet use. So some of the other topics, again, there was a little bit of the 5 E's in there. Other topics included planning, engineering, expanding, supporting schools, and some long-term goals like reducing carbon usage, dependency on cars, changing attitudes and culture, and of course, just increasing bicycle and walking to school. All right, so which equity areas are most relevant to the communities and students you're serving? So this was a new question that was added last year. And as you can see, compared to last year, a higher percent of folks selected each of the equity areas. And so the green bar is 2022, the blue bar is 2023. And when I took a look at this, I wondered why this might be. Is there more equity focus on call topics? Is there greater awareness and training in general around equity? Different makeup of survey respondents. So those were the things that I thought about that might be impacting the response to this question. But likely there's multiple factors influencing responses, and I would also be curious to hear what others think might be impacting this one. But it's great to see that many folks are selecting these options as what's relevant to their community. And this was a check all apply option, which is why, you know, the responses easily add up to more than 100%. Okay, so the next slide is how are you addressing equity needs in your work? And again, these were the themes that came through. One of them was being inclusive, and this included comments like inviting everyone, providing opportunities for all students. Another was integrating in all the work. One of the quotes from the responses is, I think it is integrated into majority of the work we do. We might miss the mark sometimes, but we always try to understand the needs of our community members when decision making. Also, people said they were doing it daily. It was universal in all their programs. Another theme that came through was prioritizing lower resource schools or schools with priority populations. And also incorporating multiple languages. And this came through in things like translating materials, having bilingual staff conducting outreach. Next poll.
Next poll. And before we jump in, I just want to note, if folks haven't had a chance to see that Julie put the results from the last poll in the chat, oh my gosh, you all are have shared such insightful things about what sustainability means to you. So thank you. This one hopefully will be a little more straightforward. It's not typing, you just get to check some boxes. So thinking about you know, the equity areas that we reflected on in the survey, and the fact that, again, when you all shared about what your interest areas were for topics for 2023, equitable engagement rose to the top. What can we think about in terms of which equity areas you all want to see more fully represented in your engagement? And you can check as many of these as you would like. So we might see a lot of different responses here. And this one does have a checkbox for something else. You can share it in the chat. So if there's something here something that you're thinking about that isn't represented in this list, or you want to add some nuance to one of the boxes that you checked, please feel free to throw that in the chat. Give you all maybe 30 more seconds.
I have a feeling since this one isn't open-ended, we might be able to show the results differently. Is that true, do you think?
Fingers crossed, yes.
Okay.
I think so.
As I said earlier, it wouldn't be a Zoom call without some technical challenges, so.
We planned for that. That wasn't a technical challenge. It was.
All right, I think Julie, give it maybe 10 more seconds, and then if you could end the poll, that would be great.
Sounds good. All right, I'm going to end it now. Are folks seeing the percentages?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
Thank you.
Wow. So not terribly surprising to see that all of these are areas that, at least to some extent across the network, are equity areas that we want to be working on. But just noting that income disparities, disability status and accessibility, and geographic disparities, it looks like, are rising to the top as things that are really of concern to more than half, and in the case of income disparities, almost everybody who responded. So thank you all for sharing. I think this will be really informative as we think about, you know, that question of how do we talk about and think about and make space to learn together around equitable engagement.
All right, so the next question is, which of the following would you attend? And in 2023, 73% of the respondents would attend a virtual meetup, and 58% said they would attend an in-person meetup in the Twin Cities. We did also have a response option that include attending a virtual meetup in 2024. And I didn't include that here, but I believe that was less than 58%, but probably, yeah, I'm not exactly sure what it was, but I think around 50-ish. And only 12% said they're unlikely to attend a Safe Routes to School meetup at all. So this is good news for potentially planning something in the next year.
We're going to do back-to-back polls, everybody. As we're thinking about a network gathering, really want to hear from you. What are you hoping to get out of a network gathering, whether that's virtual or in person, whether it's 2023 or 2024? Are you looking to be connecting with people with different backgrounds from you, coming from different geographies? Are you looking to really forge those deeper relationships with other people who are doing work that's similar to yours? Are you looking to have those more nuanced and in-depth conversations that can be really hard to have over this virtual Zoom platform that we all spend a lot of time on now? Are you hoping that there's space for digging deep and opportunities to problem solve together? Is there something else that we're not thinking of that would be a really important thing you would hope to get out of a network gathering? Feel free to share it in the chat. So yeah, just wanting to make sure that as we're starting to ideate on what a possible network gathering might look like, that we're keeping in mind what are your priorities and how are you all hoping to use that time and come away from that connection space with the things that you need to do your work. And we'll give it maybe another, I don't know, 20 or 30 seconds. We know that, not everybody on the call is interested in a network gathering, and so we may not have that 100% response rate. But if there are things here where maybe you responded to the survey thinking, no, I'm not that interested in network gathering, and you're looking at this list and you're going, oh, actually, if we did this thing, maybe I would be, feel free to respond. All right, Julie, what are you thinking? It's about time to close the poll.
Yeah, I think it's about time to close it out. Here we go.
All right.
All of the above.
all of the above, which is great. I mean, there's lots of different things that that network gathering can do, but yeah, I think I'm interested to see that opportunities to dig deep and problem solve, that doesn't strike me as terribly surprising, again, given that like it can be really hard to foster that space and find that space in this in the Zoom world, and in this particular way that the calls are formatted. So that would be really exciting. Dave, you have any other reflections besides all of the above? You're very succinct.
Yeah, I thought that you didn't like that one.
No, I did. I feel like I've been talking a lot, and you always have useful things to say.
You're doing great. I have a follow-up question thinking about digging deep and problem solving, just having attended previous network meetups that I don't know if is appropriate now that we don't have a poll open, but creating and fostering that opportunity to dig deep and problem solve on like individual projects. It can be it'll be a challenge that we'll take on. We'll figure out how to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I see at least one person made a note of they're going to share something in the chat. I didn't see anything come through except for those links from Dave from earlier, and then a note from Sarah for the last poll. So if there's anything else you all want to add, feel free to put that in the chat.
I also just wanted to say thank you to everyone for taking the time to respond. Sometimes we can often feel over surveyed, so really appreciate folks responding, as it's helpful and useful for planning these calls. But we do have some time for reflection, but before that, does anyone have any questions?
All right, I'm not seeing anybody come off mute, and I don't see anything in the chat. So I think you've probably preemptively answered everyone's questions, Joanne, with your great presentation and all of the work you put into that. So thank you so much. It's so great to have you join us year after year to help us digest this and think, strategically about how we think about survey results and what is important to share, and how we reflect back the lessons that everyone is gifting us with. So thank you.
Thank you.
Now we'll have a little bit of time for discussion. We've got maybe 10 minutes. We can see if we can wrap a little bit early to let you all go into the work of being in December and trying to wrap things up before winter break. But I think first would love to hear from folks what surprised you or delighted you about the survey results. I know delight is maybe a funny word to apply to survey results, but I do feel like sometimes I look at survey results and I'm like, oh wow, that's really cool. And maybe I'm the only one.
I have something to say. It's maybe not a, well, I guess looking at this, it's not exactly an answer to that question, but I still wanted to say it. So, like looking at kind of the interest in meeting in person versus virtually, I just want to throw out an idea of like maybe doing some sort of hybrid approach where people could get together regionally, and we could do some like Zoom stuff across the state, and we could do some in-person kind of conversation and problem solving and that kind of thing, just as one option of like to accommodate that and not force people to travel so much. We did, so in the Twin Cities, like the Safe Routes coordinators got together to do the National Safe Routes Conference recently, and that made it like so much better than just watching a Zoom meeting. That's my idea.
Sarah, I see a lot of support for your idea in the chat. Everyone's like, yep, that sounds great. Let's do that. So I appreciate you bringing that to the fore of the conversation. And yeah, if anyone else has other reflections or ideas based on, digesting the survey results, certainly those are also welcome. The other question I had for discussion, which maybe I'll just kind of throw out now, and then we can have some open-ended, reflections, discussion, is kind of what resonated with you or what didn't resonate with you in going through this presentation. Maybe there were some things in there where you're like Sarah, you're like, oh, this resonated with me in a different way, right? Where it's like, actually, why are we considering this as an either or? I think we should do both. So I will let folks, I will give you the airtime. Be quiet for a second. I do see a note in the chat about missing previous in-person regional meetings or gatherings for Safe Routes folks. Those are an important space for learning as new staff come on board, both from each other, and then what actually is Safe Routes to School. Turns out it is kind of complicated. It was like two different agencies heavily involved in making these calls happen for a start. Other things that surprised you, that didn't surprise you, that you were pleased to see that resonated with you all? Dave, I'm curious from your seat as someone who's been following, doing the Safe Routes work for a really long time, if there was anything in here that was surprising for you.
There were a couple things. One, Joanne mentioned this, but we almost always have people wrestling for a new time and day. And we've changed it before, and then other people wrestle for the new time and day. So it's like it's a small thing, but it may be a reflection of how accustomed we've gotten to being online and how much easier that makes it for people to attend. But we didn't have a lot of fuss about that. And Joanne also mentioned this, but when when thinking about equity and safe routes to school, the percentage of respondents doubled around racial equity between last year and this year. And like Joanne said, it's really hard to put your finger on what might account for something like that. But it's clearly important, and it seems to me that folks have been integrating that into their work, or if they haven't, they've shifted to seeing a need to do that. That I think is critically important for successful safe routes programs.
Yeah, that's such a good reflection, Dave. Thanks. Yeah, one thing that I think I was reflecting on, you know, there are certainly some great suggestions in here for us as a planning team, right? The agendas being overfull, that was something we've discussed internally, and, you know, tried to course correct a little bit on, but to hear also that they do feel really full to you, that there's a lot of information that we're trying to get to you all, and making sure that that has enough space and time is really important. So that was a reflection that resonated with me as someone who does, you know, is working to facilitate the calls. And I see a note from Eric in the chat that the survey results are affirming, not really surprising. So, you know, in some ways just confirming the things that you all already know, which is great, right? Part of why we want to, as I said earlier, proof back and proof our understanding with you all is to make sure that, you know, what we're understanding and taking away is the same thing as what you all are sharing with us. So appreciate that.
Another thing that we talked about, Alyssa, when we were looking at this, you know, we have a wide range of expertise on this call, people that have been working on safe routes for 4 years or more, and people that are 4 days into their job. And so as we look at the calendar for the year and try and think about the topics that we cover and, you know, how they might be relevant or like timely with relation to your safe routes to school work, but also trying to balance the needs of folks that have been doing safe routes for a really long time and people that are brand new. Some of the answers in there helped us kind of refine that a little bit more so we can be strategic about how we approach it.
I think that is a great closing thought, Dave. I will let you have almost the last word. I'll kind of do our closing and announcements. But before I do, I want to say thank you again to Joanne for all of the work that you put into analyzing our survey results. And thank you to all of you for responding to the survey. We wouldn't have anything to discuss today unless you all took that time to respond, as Joanne said. So thank you for making sure that you know, we all can continue to collectively learn in ways that improve these calls. Dave, I'm going to share screen, but before I do, I want to note there's a question about a safe routes to school contact directory for individuals involved with this network call.
I don't think we have that as public information right now. I'm not sure what the reason was for that, but that was a decision made a long time ago that we could easily revisit.
I think there would probably be a step around asking people for consent for sharing their information. Right now, you know, anybody can ask to be on the list, but we haven't recorded consent for sharing contact information. And for many of you who work for public agencies, your work information is out there on the internet. But not everybody who is on the call list is agency staff. So
This is Ellen. I was just going to say, if you're a local SHIP staff person, you can ask on Basecamp and the MnMoves page. Many of you, if you're working on active living work, are on that Basecamp MnMoves page. So that's one way to you know, put a question out there to see who else is working on safe routes to school, or at least in the SHIP community.
awesome. Thank you, Ellen. Let's see.
Can I ask Bree to elaborate on you know, what she hopes to accomplish with the contact directory, and then maybe we can think about how we would provide support with that.
Yeah, I was just it's kind of nice to know what, when there are other similar kind of size communities are structured, to be able to know kind of who, as you're thinking through a problem, how have other communities approached that? And so I don't know, or to follow up even after a call, if we hear about something that somebody's excited about or is working on, and we want to reach out for more details, that would be really helpful.
It's good to hear. One thing I'll make you aware of, and maybe other people if you're not on it, the Safe Routes to School National Partnership has a Google group of folks working on safe routes across the country. It's not as localized as maybe some of our communication channels are, but it certainly handles the breadth of expertise part pretty well. And you can always throw questions out there to those people, and they tend to love to chime in with what they're up to.
How would folks get connected to that Google group, Dave?
You know, that's another thing I should probably drop in the chat here. If I don't have it in the chat by the time we hang up, we'll send it out with the follow-up email after the call's done.
Thanks, Dave. This is the last slide. So we're keeping, as we said earlier, the date and time. So we'll be first Thursdays of the month from 10 to 11 a.m. in 2023. But we are canceling January. It's like 4 days after holiday break, 3 days after holiday break, with the first holiday on the Monday. Yeah, enjoy your break. We're not going to be diving right back into it. But if you have any questions about Dave was at Winter Walk to School Day on February 1st, make sure to reach out to Dave in the meantime. And then the day after Winter Walk to School Day, we will have our February Safe Routes to School call. So excited to talk bike fleet management and fleet maintenance in February. Thank you all so much for joining us this morning. I hope that you have a good December, a good sprint towards winter break, if that is a thing that you're doing. And we look forward to seeing you in the new year. Take care, everybody.